what are dynamic forms? So let's say you have a form and you need to find out 6 people need to stay there. I don't know 6 people need to stay there until you told me. So you type 6 in, or you select 6 from the menu, and then these 3, the first name, last name, and the age of 18 or over shows up 6 times. Well, 5 being that there's only one person is the actual person there. Same thing goes to the vehicles. The vehicles, I don't know how many you're going to have. You can have up to 3. So when it says you select it, I just basically am going to have this generate out 3 different times, there, however many you told me to. So it's the same basic form component that's been reiterated multiple times, and then it has a unique name to apply to it so that I can tell which one's which. So dynamic meaning I don't know what I'm dealing with until you tell me. And then when you tell me how many, I generate out that form to fit your needs. And as you can see, we'll go ahead and take a look here at what I've done. As you can see, the guest vehicles is rather long, and it has all these people's information and their car information all in one piece of, basically in one piece of content. So this is really helpful if you're just trying to get a whole bunch of information down. And here we go. I'll show you what it looks like on this side, on the back end admin, where you can see I just put the total amount, and it's just a big form. All right, so let's talk about how dynamic forms actually works out. I'm going to select however many people I want to bring in here, and it's going to generate out this form here, as you can see. And the same thing goes for the number of cars. Now I've got the ability to write in all this stuff. Now if I change that down to 1, as you can see, it goes back down to 1. So how does all this happen? Well, coincidentally, these are all the same form element that's just basically been iterated over, and then we pass through how many iterations we have. And now, granted, we have to tell the back end when we're going to send, we have to prep this, and so we have to kind of get ready to accept all this information as one big piece of information. Not like last name, middle name, and first name all are one unit of, one piece of information. All the visitors and all the vehicles will be tied into one, and it will be a rather large piece of information. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and show it. This is React, and I'll also show you how to do it in static. So when it comes to reservations, as you can see here, I'm telling it to change how many cars, and based on that number, I'm going to do the car description component, which is basically this form, HTML form here. And it gets repeated. For the max amount of times would be 3. But based on, I'm going to hide this based on whether or not the car numbers, what it equals for the car number. And that is determined right here. Same goes for the visitors. The guest visitor is another component that I basically will repeat multiple times over based on how many times the visitor number select is. So I select a number here, pass this along, and then when we go to guest select, it will run it as many times as I ask it to. So guest visitor number length, and it will literally write this form elements out 3 times, and they'll be identified by these names here, and as you can see, those iterations will come in. Now, one of the important things to know is when you're doing this, like I said, they're all going to have to be compiled into one. So they get determined up in hooks for this one, since it's React. Those are all determined up here. And then we can declare our values. And then if it's 1, it just gets iterated to 1. If it's 2, it's twice as long. And if it's 3 cars, then we shall have quite a bit to write. And it just gets 3 times as long as the initial. And that's compiled into one piece of data. And that's what we saw when we sent it out in our payload. Now, it's the same amount of information here. I've basically, since we're doing static here, I have had to declare these up top above these two. And that enables it to all work out for the scope here. That way it can, even though this is the third one, it'll still be able to grab these variables since I left them outside of the scope of the if statement. So this is going to build out a long string that you saw our payload. And when we basically send this off, it'll just be like a huge paragraph of how many people and all that information. Now, when I'm doing the number of visitors selecting, as you can see here, it's just, instead of a component, I have a string. And the name and the placeholders and all this information is basically just it being added up. So the name here is, instead of the component, it's basically being added up in a string and then compiled. Or it's been concatenated and then added to the target right here. And the same thing goes for the amount of cars. Now, I only needed to make the form one time. And unfortunately, that time was in one big string. So this is the kind of stand-alone, like what a component would be for in React. This is kind of the component per se in static. I've written the HTML, and I have to place the variables within the string as it's being concatenated. And then from there, once it's all finished, it will go to my vehicle target form, which is what you saw that when I said however many cars I want to have, it will ultimately write this out that many times with the incrementing ID number to help identify each form number. And then there will be compiled into the payload, as you saw earlier. So the big difference here to take away from this is that in React you're making a component that you have to import, and in static you're going to do the same concept, but instead of a component you have a string that you will ultimately iterate multiple times to generate out your form. That's the difference, but it's all kind of the same thing, and so just be ready for however many they don't have, and then from there you'll be able to be prepared on your other side. This is something that can be brought out a few different ways, but this is the way I ended up for this one in particular. I just wanted to have a content piece that has one bit of detail that's rather large. Thanks.